Our focus for this month's Q&A video comes from a Patreon member called Bonnie, who asks, Paul, how do you choose the colours of the first washes? Are they just the lightest colours in that section? Well, today I'm going to give you some ideas on how I choose the colours and also how to apply them. Let's get started and get those brushes wet. Now, the materials that I use when I'm creating a painting like this, in order to get those background foundation washes just right. What I'm going to use is the watercolour paper, which is a 140 pound cold pressed. This one in particular is one by Buckingford, and you can see from the other paintings I've done here, it's all the same paper. Sometimes I use arch paper as well, but it just depends on the day really and how I feel. I do. Buckingford is not a cotton paper, but more of a chemical pulp, but I get on with it really well. It absorbs the paint really nicely as well, which is important to me. So working with paper like this is ideal, and because it's a not surface, in other words, it's not gone through hot rollers or anything like that, which will then make the paper hot pressed and not cold pressed. We've got a little bit of texture on the paper, which is very important, and I think that just adds to those paintings and creates texture where we think it's needed, especially for large backgrounds like this one. Now my paintings are on a block pad, in other words, it's glued all the way around. So just open this one up, I'll show you what I mean like. When you look carefully, I'll try and get it on camera, at the edge here, there's a tiny gap between each individual sheet. Other than the gap, it's glued all the way around the sheet. And there's even an arrow, I'll show you there, look, as you can see on the paper, which guides you to that gap, so you know where it is. It just means that when you wet that paper, you know very well that that paper will stay mostly flat. I say mostly, it does bend and cockle and twist when you first wet it down. But normally, as you can see here, it dries relatively flat. So it's not too bad, a bit of a kink in there, but certainly good enough for me. As for the brushes, these are the sort of brushes I tend to use on small washes. So if I'm working on, for example, this cardinal, and I'm working just on the back, the light washes I'll probably use a size 4 or size 2. And these are both synthetic bristle brushes as well. I'll pop a link down below for you within the description section to all the materials which I use here on YouTube and also on my Patreon channel as well. If you're working with a larger wash, for example a background like there, I tend to use a very old size 18 Pro Art brush. This is also synthetic as well. I don't tend to use much in the way of sable nowadays. I do prefer synthetic bristles, I really do. I find they got much more of a spring in them compared to sable, for example. And I've never invested in expensive brushes. I honestly don't think there's any need for them. Now, how do I go about choosing colours which I need for a subject? Let's move this robin out of the way a minute. I want to look at something like this one here. Anybody that knows birds will know that's a blue jay. And it's quite a common bird, isn't it, in America, not here in the UK. So how do we choose the colour that we need for that subject? Be it a cat, a dog, a bird, any animal in question. But what you need to do is look at that photograph very carefully and pinch into the photo as well. With watercolour, we always start off with a lighter shade first of all, don't we? So what we need to look at is a light colour like this one here. See this here? So if I get my pencil a minute, just that one there, look. See how light and pale that one is? That's what we're looking for, something like that. So how are we going to get that? Okay. What I tend to do is test out the colours on some scrap paper first of all. And I've got plenty of offcuts as well for my scrap paper like these here. All sorts of scrap pieces from failed paintings, tester paintings and all sorts. So for this colour here, what I'm looking for, the lightest shades you can see in there. We could try, for example, I don't know, French ultramarine. Let's have a look at that one first of all. Well, not really. The problem with French ultramarine is the granulating colour. So therefore we know the paint will break up and, as I say, granulate on the paper. You can see it's doing that already on there. If I water that down, a bit of water on my metal ferrule there, it's still not quite the right colour. You know, you can see this is more of a purpley blue, isn't it? So what I'm going to do, I'll try adding to that a small amount of purple. Let's go for, I don't know. Let's go for this one here, ultramarine violet, that'll do. Just add a touch of that in there. And see what that one's like. And straight away, that's looking more like that there, isn't it? Nearly, just about, not far off. We could strengthen the colour a little bit more. And when we're working on a foundation wash, we may not just use one wash, we may use more than one. But the second one going on once the first wash is completely bone dry. Let's try phthalo blue or Windsor blue, whichever one you want to call it. So I'll put that one on first of all. I'll go for the same purple, the same violet. Add that one in. Oh, it might be too much. A bit more purple. So the idea is to go back and forth, testing back and forth like this, until you get the right shade. Now if I water that down a little bit, what's that like? Ah, ooh, hey, you know what? That's not far off, you know. So if you water this down, you can add a touch more ultramarine violet in one area, see what it looks like. Play with it while it's still wet. You can try a bit more phthalo blue, probably around there. That's too blue. So that's not working. However, this is around there and there is working. And that, to me, is very similar to this colour here. And you wouldn't think that when you look at these colours here, it's going to make up something like this colour for the entire bird. The same thing will apply when I'm working on something like the Eastern Bluebird. Now, the blue is a little bit different on this one. You see it's more of an intense blue in places. So you just increase the amounts of colours and you play back and forth with those colours. If you're working on the orange, for example, again, you can use yellow and red. If you want to, you can try that first of all. So let's say lemon yellow. Drop a bit of that down there. Get some red. Maybe scarlet red, that one there, though. There you go. Try that. Too pale. A little bit more. What's that like? That's looking better. Maybe a touch more. Keep washing that brush out in between as well. And that is looking more like it's not quite. It's now gone too far one way. So you can try that again. A bit more lemon yellow in there. That's brought it back a touch. So that's not too far off for those lightest tones we can see. The lightest tones is nearly white, but the lightest colour tones we're looking for. And that's sort of these lighter tones down there on these lines we can see. I said it's still probably a little bit too, well, orangey yellow. So I need to dullen that down. And to do that, what I tend to use a little bit of burnt umber or raw umber, something like that. So quite a dull colour. Let's just try part of this. A little bit more, Paul. Go on, be daring. Too much. Blend it in. And that's looking quite good, actually. I do like this version here. So by testing it in different sections within one testing area, adding a bit more yellow in one place, a bit more red in one place, or if you're using orange, do that way around as well, by adding colours to that orange. So if you use something like, let's go for cadmium orange. Oh, that's strong, isn't it? That's a really strong colour. If I add to that maybe a touch of red, let's go for alizarin crimson, that one there. Try that. And you see straight away, that's far too strong and also too bright. So let's tone it down a little bit, burn some again. Probably a touch more. So tone down probably part of it. And that's looking more like it again, isn't it? Let's get in there. That's looking similar to this one here. Hello. And to be honest with you, it's only until they're dry that you really know if the colours work or not. So allow the colours or the washes like this to dry first of all, before you come to some ultimate decision on which one to use. Because very often the colours will dry that little bit lighter, depending obviously how much pigment you had within that paint. When you're mixing colours such as these here, or whatever colour you need to mix for whichever project you're working on, oh, look at that one. Then I tend to use the same colours again for the beginning of that painting. So if I start on the details, as you can see with this video here, I'm using the same mixes that I've already made up, initially anyway. And you want it all to sort of work together. If you need to make a darker version of this colour, then the background washes for those darker areas. You can see just there, yeah, that one there. Then you can use the same colour again, and whilst it's still wet, let's just try that out again, shall we? I'm going to pop in a little bit more brown, so burnt umber again, just into here. Touch more, Paul, be daring. Go on, lad. Aye. But that's still far too bright, isn't it, on there? Just dull that down a little bit more. You can use Payne's Grey, if you want to. You can use a little bit of lamp black as well, or coal black, or whatever blacks you've got. Try it into that mix, but it can look a little bit flat sometimes using black. I'm going to go for some blue. Let's go for maybe a touch of indigo. Just in there. We'll pop that in there then. Too much blue. So what you need to do then is get some more brown. Pop that over the top. Like that. And that already is looking more of a darker colour to that, isn't it? and keep working it back and forth until you get it about right. But once you've completed this, write down the colours like I've done here of all the testing work you've done. At least then you know what you've used to make that colour. And that's all you would do when you're testing out for any particular picture you're working on, like that one there. Just to make sure that you don't forget the colour combinations you've used to get those mixes you've made. That will help avoid some of the pitfalls and some of the mistakes you can make within the painting, especially where colour is concerned. So always worth testing before you start on your project. So when people say to me, Paul, how do you choose your colours? How do you know which ones to use? Well, you can see straight away. I'm doing it through trial and error, that's it. I'm trying out different colour combinations, see which ones work the best. Especially when they're dry, remember to let it dry first. So there's no steadfast way of learning this. All you need to do is test the colours out. So I've got 4 different blues for a bluebird of some form, and I can look for those 4 blues. If it's an orange bird, I can use orange or a combination of yellows and reds to see what I can get from that. Depending on the intensity of those colour washes that you use, will overall influence the texture and the form of the plumage, even at this very early stage. This is why I stress we have to get this right to begin with, before we start adding those layers of details. Sometimes I'll need a second wash layer on the painting. I know, why more than one? Well, the thing is, sometimes I might apply the first wash a little bit too watery, and so therefore it's dried that little bit lighter again. And that is always difficult to judge. So once it's completely bone dry, I re-dampen the area, usually just 1 layer of water. Allow it to soak into the paper. Don't make it too wet. And then add a second wash over the top. And you can increase the amount of colour in certain areas as well. So the stronger the wash colour, the more underlying shape you can start to create just by using these foundation washes. And it all sets the scene as well when we start to add the feathers over the top. And usually the second layer I use are the same colours. Sometimes I might add an additional colour in there if I think it's needed, but normally they are the same mixes, sometimes of the same consistency and sometimes slightly stronger, depending on obviously how weak that first wash was. Here's another video which will help you choose the right colour for your foundation wash.